Don't you understand? They will do away with him. The police, I mean. It's not like anyone will take him and look after him. With all those cops, he puts everybody off. I told him that there was a pond at the police station where stray dogs are taken. His dog was certain to be there and he could get it back on payment of a small charge. He asked me how much the charge was but there I couldn't help him. Then he flew into a rage again. It is likely I would give money for a mutt like that? No damned fear. They can kill him for all I care. And he went on calling his dog the usual names. Raymond gave a laugh and turned into the hall. I followed him upstairs and we were parted on the landing. A minute or two later, I heard Solomon's footsteps and a knock on my door. When I opened it, he halted for a moment in the doorway. Excuse me, I hope I'm not disturbing you, I asked him in, but he shook his head. He was staring at his toe caps, and the gnarled old hands were trembling. Without meeting my eyes, he started talking. They won't really take him for me, will they, Monsieur Marcel? Surely they wouldn't do a thing like that. If they do, I don't know what will become of me. I told him that, so far as I knew, they kept stray dogs in the pond for 3 days, waiting for their owners to call them. After that, they disposed of the dogs as they thought fit. He stared at me in a silence for a moment. Then he said, "Good evening." After that, I heard him pacing up and down in his room for quite a while. Then his bed creaked. Through the wall, there came a little wheezing sound, and I guessed that he was weeping. For some reason, I don't know what, I began thinking of mother, but I had to get up early next day, so I wasn't feeling hungry. I ate without supper and went straight to bed. Raymond rang me up at the office. He said that a friend of his, to whom he had spoken about me, invited me to spend next Sunday at his little seaside bungalow just outside Algiers. I told him I would have been delighted, only I had promised to spend Sunday with a girl. Raymond promptly replied that she could come too. In fact, his friends' wives will be very pleased not to be only women in a party of men. I would have liked to hang up at once, as my employer doesn't approve of my using the office phone for private calls. But Raymond asked me to hold on. He had something else to tell me, and that was why he would ring me up. True, he could have waited till the evening to pass on the invitation. It is like this, he said. I've been shut out all the morning by some Arabs. One of them is the brother of that girl I had drove with. If you see him hanging round the house when you come back, pass me the word. I promised to do so. Just then my employer sent for me. For a moment I felt uneasy. As I expected, he was going to tell me to stick to my work and not to waste time chattering with friends over the phone. However, it wasn't nothing of the kind. He wanted to discuss a project he had in view, though so far he would come to no decision. It was to open a branch at Paris so as to be able to deal with the big companies on the spot without postal delays, and he wanted to know if I would like to post there. You're a young man, he said, and I'm pretty sure you would enjoy living in Paris, and of course, you could travel about France for some months in the year. I told him I was quite prepared to go, but really I didn't care much one way or the other. He then asked if a change of life, as he called it, didn't appeal to me, and I answered that one never changed his way of life. One life was as good as other, and my present one suited me quite well. At this, he looked rather hurt and told me that I always shilly-shallied and that I lacked ambition, a great defect to his mind, when one was in business. I returned to my work. I would have preferred not to vex him, but I saw no reason for changing my life. By and large, it wasn't an unpleasant one. As a student, I had plenty of ambition of the kind he meant. But when I had to drop my studies, I very soon realized all that was a pretty futile. Mary came that evening and asked me if I would marry her. I said I didn't mind. If she was keen on it, we would get married. Then she asked me again if I loved her. I replied, much as before. The third question meant nothing or next to nothing, but I suppose I didn't. If that's how you feel, she said, why marry me? I explained it that it had no importance really, but if it would give her pleasure, we could get married right away. I pointed out that, anyhow, the suggestion came for her as for me. I would merely said yes. Then she remarked that marriage was a serious matter, to which I answered no. She kept silent after that, staring at me in a curious way. Then she asked, suppose another girl had asked you to marry her. I mean, a girl like you liked in the same way as you liked me. Would you have said yes to her? Naturally. Then she said she wondered if she really loved me or not. I, of course, couldn't enlighten her as to that. And after another silence, she murmured something about my being a queer fellow. And I dare say that's why I love you, she added. But maybe that's why one day I will come to hate you. To which I had nothing to say, so I said nothing. She thought for a bit, then started smiling and taking my arm, repeated that she was in earnest, she really wanted to marry me. All right, I answered, we will get married, whenever you like. I then mentioned the proposal made by my employer, and Mary said she would love to go to Paris. When I told her I would live in Paris for a while, she asked me what it was like. A dingy sort of town, to my mind, masses of pigeons and dark courtyards, and the people have washed out white faces. Then we went for a walk all the way across the town by the main street. The women were good lookers, and I asked Mary if she too noticed this. She said yes, and that she saw what I meant. After that, we said nothing for some minutes. However, as I didn't want her to leave me, I suggested we should dine together at Celeste's. She would have loved to dine with me, she said, only she was booked up for the evening. We were near my place, and I said, au revoir then. She looked at me in the eyes. Don't you want to know what I'm doing this evening? I really want to know, but I hadn't thought of asking her, and I guessed she was making a grievance of it. I must have looked embarrassed, for suddenly she started laughing and bent toward me, putting her lips for a kiss. I went myself to Celeste's. When I had just started my dinner, an odd-looking little woman came in and asked if she might sit at my table. Of course she might. She had a chubby face, like a ripe apple, bright eyes, and moved in a curiously jerky way, as if she were on wires. After taking off her close-fitting jacket, she sat down and started studying the bill of fare with a sort of rapt attention. Then she called Celeste and gave her order, very fast but quite distinctly. One didn't lose a word. While waiting for the hours to wear, she opened her bag, took a slip of paper and a pencil. She added up the bill in advance, diving into her bag again. She produced a purse and took from it the exact sum, plus a small tip, and placed it on the cloth in the front of her. Just then the waiter brought the hors d'oeuvre, which she produced to wolf down very carelessly. While waiting for the next course, she produced another pencil, this time a blue one, from her bag, and the radio magazine for the coming week, and started making ticks against almost all the items of the daily programs. There were a dozen of pages in the magazine, and she continued studying them closely through the meal. When I had finished mine, she was still ticking off items with the same meticulous attention. Then she rose, put on her jacket again, with the same abrupt, robot-like gestures, and walked briskly out of the restaurant. Having nothing better to do, I followed her for a short distance. Keeping on the curb of the pavement, she walked straight ahead, never swearing or looking back, and it was extraordinary how fast she covered the ground, considering her smallness. In fact, the pace was too much for me, and I soon lost sight of her and turned back homeward. For a moment, the little robot, as I thought of her, had much impressed me, but I soon forgot about her.